The story of America is often told as a tale of freedom, but for many, it began with captivity.
In 1526, the first Africans were brought to what is now the United States. They were forced into slavery by European colonists. This marked the beginning of a long and brutal system.
Over the next 2 centuries, millions of Africans were taken from their homes. They were shipped across the Atlantic in horrific conditions. Many died during the journey. Those who survived faced a life of hard labor and cruelty. They worked on plantations, growing crops like tobacco and cotton.
Indigenous peoples, the Native Americans who were already living in these lands, also suffered greatly. Colonists took their land and forced them into reservations. They faced disease and violence. Many were killed or driven from their homes.
The experiences of African Americans and indigenous peoples were deeply intertwined. Both groups were seen as inferior by the European colonists. Both were subjected to violence, oppression, and the theft of their land and freedom. This shared history of struggle would shape the future of the nation.
In 1776, the United States declared its independence. The Declaration of Independence proclaimed that all men are created equal. Yet slavery continued to exist. The new nation was built on a contradiction.
During this time, slavery expanded westward. Millions more Africans were brought to America against their will. They were forced to work on plantations in the South. The cotton they picked helped to fuel the American economy.
Indigenous peoples continued to face displacement and violence. They were pushed further west as settlers encroached on their land. The Trail of Tears, a forced relocation of Native Americans, stands as a stark reminder of this brutal period.
The fight for freedom was relentless. African Americans resisted slavery in many ways. They ran away, rebelled, and fought for their liberation. Abolitionists, both black and white, spoke out against the evils of slavery.
The Civil War, 1861 to 1865, brought an end to slavery, but it did not bring equality. After the war, laws known as Jim Crow laws were enacted in the South. These laws enforced segregation, separating people by race.
African Americans were treated as second-class citizens. They were denied access to good schools, jobs, and housing. They faced discrimination and violence. Lynchings, the public killing of black people by mobs, were a terrifying reality.
Indigenous peoples continued to struggle for recognition and their rights. They faced discrimination and the loss of their cultures and languages. The government tried to assimilate them, forcing them to abandon their traditions.
This period was a time of great hardship and injustice, but it was also a time of resilience. African Americans built their own communities, institutions, and businesses. They fought for their rights, paving the way for the civil rights movement. Section 4, the long fight for equality, civil rights and beyond from 1954 to the present.
The mid-20th century saw the rise of the civil rights movement. African Americans, along with their allies, challenged segregation and discrimination. They organized boycotts, sit-ins, and marches.
Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X emerged. They inspired millions with their calls for justice and equality. The movement led to landmark legislation like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
Indigenous peoples also fought for their rights during this time. The American Indian Movement, or AIM, challenged government policies and demanded self-determination. They brought attention to the injustices faced by Native Americans.
While progress has been made, the fight for equality continues. Systemic anti-other sentiment and discrimination still exist. African Americans and indigenous peoples face disparities in areas like education, healthcare, and criminal justice. Section 5, Shared Histories, Common Threads, African Americans and Indigenous Peoples.
The history of African Americans and Indigenous peoples is deeply intertwined. Both groups have endured centuries of oppression and injustice. They have faced slavery, segregation, and discrimination.
Despite their struggles, they have shown incredible resilience and strength. They have fought for their rights and for recognition. They have made significant contributions to American culture, history, and society.
Their shared experiences have created a bond of understanding and solidarity. They continue to fight for justice and equality, not just for themselves, but for all marginalized communities.
Section 6, continuing the fight, justice for all.
The struggle for social justice is ongoing. We must continue to fight against racism, discrimination, and inequality in all its forms. We must acknowledge the past and learn from its mistakes. It is important to listen to the voices of marginalized communities.
We must amplify their stories and support their fight for justice. By working together, we can create a more just and equitable society for all.
The fight for freedom and equality is a marathon, not a sprint. We must continue to push forward with hope and determination until justice prevails for everyone.